The fever hit Olivia Grayson at dawn, but the foreman didn't care one bit about the sweat beading on her forehead or the way her hands trembled as she hauled the heavy linens from the guest rooms down to the wash basins. The year was 1876, and the Silver Creek Hotel in Wilcox, Arizona Territory, was overflowing with miners, gamblers, and drifters who left their rooms in states that would make a pig farmer blush. Olivia had been working at the hotel for 8 months now, ever since her father died in a mining accident and left her with nothing but debts and a tarnished family name. She was 22 years old, and every day felt like a battle just to survive. "Move faster, Grayson," Foreman Dutch Carmichael barked from the doorway, his thick arms crossed over his barrel chest. He was a cruel man who took pleasure in watching the staff suffer, especially the women who had no choice but to endure his tyranny. "Those rooms need to be ready by noon, and I don't give a damn if you're feeling poorly. You work through it, or you find yourself out on the street." Olivia wanted to tell him that she could barely see straight, that the world was spinning like a top, and her body felt like it was burning from the inside out. But she knew better than to complain. Jobs for women were scarce in Wilcox, and without this position, she would be destitute. So she nodded, swallowed the bile rising in her throat, and dragged another set of soiled sheets toward the washing area behind the hotel. The Arizona sun was merciless even in late October, and by mid-morning, Olivia could barely stand. Her legs felt like they were made of water, and every breath scraped through her lungs like broken glass. She had managed to clean 6 rooms, but there were still 4 more to go, and Carmichael kept circling like a vulture, shouting orders and threats in equal measure. "You think you've got it hard," he sneered as she stumbled past him with another armload of linens. "Try working in the mines like a real laborer. You women have it easy and still you complain." Olivia didn't have the strength to respond. She made it to the washing area and dropped the sheets into the basin, then leaned against the wooden post to steady herself. Her vision was blurring at the edges, and she could feel her heart hammering irregularly in her chest. Something was very wrong, but she couldn't afford to acknowledge it. She splashed cold water on her face and forced herself to keep moving. By early afternoon, she was delirious. She couldn't remember finishing the last 2 rooms, but somehow she found herself in the hotel kitchen, tasked with helping prepare the evening meal. The cook, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Patterson, took one look at her and gasped. "Child, you're burning up," she said, pressing a cool hand to Olivia's forehead. "You need to lie down immediately." "Can't," Olivia mumbled, her words slurring together. "Carmichael will fire me." "Let him try," Mrs. Patterson said fiercely, but they both knew it was an empty threat. The foreman had all the power and he wielded it without mercy. Before Mrs. Patterson could say anything else, Carmichael burst into the kitchen, his face red with anger. "What's this? Taking a break, Grayson. I don't pay you to stand around gossiping." "She's sick, you fool," Mrs. Patterson snapped. "Can't you see she's barely conscious?" "I see a lazy girl trying to shirk her duties," Carmichael retorted. He grabbed Olivia's arm and yanked her toward the back door. "If you can't work, then get out. I need people who can pull their weight." The sudden movement was too much for Olivia's failing body. The world tilted violently, and she felt herself falling. She heard Mrs. Patterson scream, heard Carmichael curse, and then everything went black. When Olivia opened her eyes again, she wasn't sure how much time had passed. She was lying on the ground behind the hotel, her cheek pressed against the dirt. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the alley. Her entire body ached and the fever had gotten worse. She tried to sit up but couldn't manage it. Panic fluttered weakly in her chest. Had Carmichael really just left her here? Was anyone coming to help? she heard footsteps approaching, heavy boots crunching on the gravel. For a moment, she hoped it was Mrs. Patterson, but the footfalls were too heavy, too deliberate. A man's shadow fell across her, blocking out the sun. "Easy now," a deep voice said, rough but not unkind. "Don't try to move." Olivia squinted up at the figure looming over her. Even in her fevered state, she could see that he was massive. The man stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to blot out the sky. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a simple cotton shirt that strained against the muscles of his chest and arms. Everything about him spoke of raw strength and survival in the wilderness. "Who are you?" Olivia managed to whisper. "Name's Zachary Lawson," he said, kneeling beside her. His hands were gentle as he touched her forehead despite their size. "And you're burning up something fierce. How long have you been lying out here?" "I don't know," she admitted. "The foreman, he pushed me out." Zachary's jaw tightened, and she saw anger flash in his green eyes. "He left a sick woman in the dirt. What kind of man does that?" "The kind who runs this hotel," she said weakly. "Please, I need to get back to work. I'll lose my job." "You're not going anywhere except to bed," Zachary said firmly. He slid one arm under her shoulders and the other under her knees, then lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. The sudden movement made her head spin, but she found herself pressed against his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heartbeat through his shirt. "Put me down," she protested, but her voice had no strength behind it. "Not a chance," he replied, already striding away from the hotel. "You need proper rest and medicine, and you're not going to get either of those things here." "Where are you taking me?" Olivia asked, but exhaustion was pulling at her again, dragging her down into darkness. "Somewhere safe," Zachary said, and those were the last words she heard before unconsciousness claimed her once more. The next time Olivia woke, everything was different. Instead of the hard ground, she was lying on something soft. Instead of the harsh Arizona sun, there was cool dimness. And instead of silence, she could hear the crackle of a fire and the sound of water being poured. She opened her eyes slowly and found herself in a small cabin. The walls were made of rough-hewn logs, and the single room was sparsely furnished but clean. She was lying on a bed covered with thick wool blankets, and nearby, Zachary Lawson was bent over a small stove, stirring something in a pot. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Zachary turned immediately, and she saw relief cross his rugged features. "You're awake. Good. You've been out for nearly a day." "A day?" Olivia tried to sit up, but her body protested. Every muscle ached and the fever still pulsed through her, though it didn't feel quite as intense as before. "Easy," Zachary said, crossing to the bed in 2 long strides. He helped her sit up and propped pillows behind her back. "You're still very sick. Your body needs time to heal." "I can't afford time," Olivia said desperately. "I need to get back to the hotel. If I'm gone too long, Carmichael will give my job to someone else." "Let him," Zachary said flatly. "Any man who treats his workers the way he treated you doesn't deserve loyalty." "You don't understand," Olivia said, and to her horror, she felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I have nowhere else to go. No family, no money. That job is all I have." Zachary's expression softened. He pulled a rough wooden chair over to the bedside and sat down, his large frame making the furniture look almost comically small. "Tell me," he said simply. And so, perhaps because the fever had stripped away her usual defenses, or perhaps because there was something about this stranger that made her feel safe, Olivia told him everything. She told him about her father's death, about the debts he'd left behind, about the months of backbreaking work at the hotel just to keep a roof over her head and food in her belly. She told him about Carmichael's cruelty and the fear that dogged her every step. Zachary listened without interrupting, his green eyes focused intently on her face. When she finally finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How old are you?" he asked. 22, Olivia said. "Why, just wondering," he replied. "I'm 28. Been living up in these mountains for about 3 years now, ever since I finished my stint as an Army scout. I come down to Wilcox every few months for supplies, but mostly I keep to myself." "Then why help me?" Olivia asked. "You don't know me." "Because it was the right thing to do," Zachary said simply. "And because I know what it's like to have nowhere to turn." He stood and returned to the stove, ladling soup into a wooden bowl. "Now, you need to eat something. This is just broth and herbs, but it'll help with the fever." He brought the bowl to her, and Olivia realized how hungry she was. The soup was simple but flavorful, and she could feel it warming her from the inside. Zachary watched her eat with what seemed like satisfaction, then took the empty bowl when she finished. "What happens now?" Olivia asked. "Now you rest," Zachary said. "You're going to stay here until you're well enough to make decisions about your future, and before you argue, I'm not taking no for an answer. You nearly died back there, Olivia. Your body needs time to recover." The use of her first name should have felt too familiar, but instead it felt right. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said softly. "Don't need thanks," Zachary replied. "Just get better, that's enough for me." Over the next several days, Olivia slowly began to heal. Zachary proved to be a surprisingly capable caretaker, brewing medicinal teas from herbs he gathered in the mountains and ensuring she ate regular meals. He never pushed her to talk, but he was always there when she needed something, moving around the small cabin with quiet efficiency. As her fever broke and her strength began to return, Olivia found herself watching Zachary more closely. He was unlike any man she'd ever met. In town, men were either rough and crude like Carmichael, or weak and ineffectual like the hotel guests who complained about every little thing. Zachary was different. He was strong, certainly, his body honed by years of surviving in the wilderness, but there was a gentleness to him that surprised her. The way he handled things, whether it was stoking the fire or dressing the small cuts on her hands from her work at the hotel, showed a patience and care she hadn't expected. "How did you end up out here?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire. She was finally well enough to leave the bed, though she still tired easily. Zachary was whittling a piece of wood, his large hands working with surprising delicacy. "After the war, I worked as a scout for the Army. Spent a lot of time tracking Apache raiders and helping settlers find safe routes through the territory. But I got tired of the killing, tired of the politics. One day I just decided I'd had enough, so I came up here and built this cabin. Been here ever since." "Don't you get lonely?" Olivia asked. He was quiet for a moment, the only sound the scrape of his knife against the wood. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but loneliness is better than being around people who only want to use you or hurt you. At least, that's what I used to think." "Used to," she prompted. Zachary looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Having you here has reminded me what I've been missing: conversation, company, someone to care for." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. "I've been a burden to you." "No," he said firmly. "You've been anything but. Taking care of you, it's made me realize how empty this cabin has been, how empty I've been." The air between them suddenly felt charged with something Olivia didn't quite understand but couldn't deny. She looked away, focusing on the fire. "I should start thinking about going back to town soon, figuring out what to do next." "You could stay here," Zachary said quietly. Olivia's head snapped up. "What? Stay here," he repeated, setting down his whittling. "With me. I know it's not much, And I know we barely know each other, but I have plenty of supplies and I could teach you how to live off the land. You'd be safe here, Olivia. No one to mistreat you or take advantage of you." "I can't just stay here," Olivia said, though her heart was pounding. "What would people think?" "There's no one around for miles to think anything," Zachary pointed out. "And even if there were, I don't much care about other people's opinions. But if it would make you more comfortable, we could go into town and have the preacher marry us." Olivia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Marry us? You're proposing marriage, I suppose I am," Zachary said, and she could see color rising above his beard. "I know it's sudden, and I know I'm not much of a catch, just a mountain man with a small cabin and a simple life. But I can provide for you, Olivia. I can keep you safe, and I think, given time, we could be happy together." "You don't love me," Olivia said, though her heart was aching at the thought. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Zachary said. "I know you're strong and brave. I know you've survived things that would have broken other people. I know that having you here has made me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Maybe that's not love yet, but it could grow into it, if you're willing to give it a chance." Olivia's mind was spinning. A week ago, she'd been scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots, barely surviving day to day. Now she was sitting in a mountain cabin with a man who was offering her not just safety but a future. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most tempting offer she'd ever received. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you tie yourself to someone like me? I have nothing to offer you." Zachary stood and crossed to where she sat. He knelt down so they were eye to eye and she could see the sincerity in his face. "You have everything to offer. Your courage, your spirit, your presence. That's more than enough for me. But I won't force you into anything, Olivia. If you want to go back to town, find another job, make your own way, I'll respect that. I'll even help you do it. But I had to ask. I had to at least give you the option of staying." Olivia looked into his green eyes and saw only honesty there. This man, this stranger who had carried her out of that alley and nursed her back to health, was offering her a life. A real life, not just survival. Could she really say yes? Could she really tie herself to someone she'd known for less than 2 weeks? But then she thought about going back to Wilcox, about finding another job where she'd be at the mercy of men like Carmichael. She thought about the loneliness she'd felt every day since her father died, the sense that she was completely alone in the world. And she looked at Zachary, this strong, gentle man who had shown her more kindness in a week than anyone else had shown her in months. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "what would that look like? What would you expect from me?" "I'd expect you to be my partner," Zachary said. "To share the work of keeping this place running, to learn the skills you'd need to survive up here. And eventually, when you're ready, to share my bed and maybe start a family. But there's no rush on any of it, Olivia. We take things at whatever pace felt right." "And if it doesn't work out?" she asked. "If we discover we can't stand each other?" "Then I'll help you get settled somewhere else," Zachary promised. "I won't trap you here against your will. You'll always have a choice." Olivia took a deep breath. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was madness, that she should go back to town and find a sensible solution to her problems. But her heart, the part of her that had been so lonely and afraid, was singing at the prospect of staying here with this man. "Yes," she said, the word coming out barely above a whisper. Zachary's face broke into a smile that transformed his rugged features. "Yes, yes," she repeated, stronger this time. "I'll stay, I'll marry you." He reached out and took her hand, his rough palm warm against hers. "You won't regret this, Olivia. I swear to you, I'll spend every day making sure you don't regret this." They went into Wilcox 2 days later, riding double on Zachary's sturdy horse. Olivia's legs were still weak from her illness, but she felt stronger with each passing hour. As they rode through the mountains, Zachary pointed out landmarks and told her about the wildlife they might encounter. His voice was deep and soothing, and Olivia found herself relaxing against his broad back, feeling safe for the first time in months. When they reached Wilcox, Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety. What if someone saw her? What if Carmichael tried to confront her about abandoning her job? But Zachary seemed to sense her worry. He guided the horse directly to the small church at the edge of town, where the preacher lived in a modest house behind the sanctuary. Reverend Thomas was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened as Zachary explained their situation, his gaze moving between the mountain man and the young woman who stood beside him. "You're certain about this?" he asked Olivia. "Marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly." "I'm certain," Olivia said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. In the short time she'd known Zachary, he had shown her more respect and care than any other man in her life. Whatever happened next, she knew he would keep his word to protect her. "Very well," Reverend Thomas said. "Let me get my Bible." The ceremony was simple, conducted in the small church with only the Reverend's wife as witness. Zachary had purchased a simple gold band from the general store, and when he slid it onto Olivia's finger, his hands were steady and sure. She looked up into his eyes as they said their vows and saw not just determination there, but something warmer, something that might, in time, become love. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thomas said. "You may kiss your bride." Zachary leaned down slowly, giving Olivia plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. But she didn't want to. She let him kiss her, a gentle press of lips that sent warmth flooding through her body. It was her first real kiss, and she found herself hoping it would be far from her last. As they left the church, now legally wed, Olivia felt as though she were stepping into a new life. They made a few more stops in town, Zachary buying supplies and Olivia purchasing some fabric and thread to make new clothes. She half expected to run into Carmichael or someone else from the hotel, but luck was with them. They completed their errands without incident and were soon riding back up into the mountains. The sun was setting as they reached the cabin, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Zachary helped Olivia down from the horse, then carried the supplies inside while she stood for a moment, looking at what was now her home. It was small and isolated, so different from anything she'd known before. But it was hers. Theirs. Inside, Zachary busied himself putting away the supplies and starting a fire. Olivia helped as much as she could, still mindful of her recovering strength. When they finally sat down to a simple dinner of salt pork and beans, the weight of what they'd done seemed to settle over both of them. "Are you having second thoughts?" Zachary asked, watching her carefully. "No," Olivia said honestly. "Just trying to adjust to how much my life has changed in such a short time." "I know it's a lot," he said, "but we'll figure it out together. I meant what I said before, Olivia. We'll take things at your pace." That night, Zachary insisted she take the bed while he made a pallet on the floor. Olivia protested, but he was firm. "You're still recovering," he said, "and I'm not going to rush you into anything you're not ready for. We're married, yes, but that doesn't mean we can't take our time getting to know each other properly." Olivia felt a rush of gratitude for his consideration. She climbed into the bed, now her marriage bed, and pulled the blankets up to her chin. Across the room, she could see Zachary's large form stretched out on the floor, his breathing gradually evening out as he fell asleep. She lay awake for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. A week and a half ago, she'd been sick and desperate, with no hope for the future. Now she was married to a mountain man, living in a cabin miles from anywhere. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something like peace settling over her heart. The next weeks were a time of adjustment and discovery. Zachary was true to his word, treating Olivia with unfailing respect and patience as she learned the rhythms of their new life together. He taught her how to hunt small game, how to identify edible plants, and how to cure meat for the long winter ahead. She was surprised to discover she had a knack for these practical skills, and even more surprised to find she enjoyed the work. Zachary, in turn, seemed to appreciate having her there. He talked more than she suspected he had in years, telling her stories about his time as a scout and his encounters with various wildlife. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. And he was endlessly patient with her questions, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things that were second nature to him. As the days passed, Olivia found herself watching him more and more. The way his muscles flexed as he split wood, the concentration on his face as he repaired a broken tool, the gentleness of his hands when he showed her how to skin a rabbit. She began to understand that what she felt for him was growing into something deeper than gratitude. One evening, about a month after their wedding, they were sitting by the fire after dinner. Olivia was mending a shirt, and Zachary was working on a new chair for the cabin. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, and she set down her sewing. "Zachary," she said. He looked up immediately, always attentive when she spoke. "Yes, I think I'm ready," she said softly. He set down his tools, his expression questioning. "Ready for what? To be your wife," she said, feeling her cheeks heat. "In every way." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like hunger. But he didn't move. "Are you certain? I told you there was no rush." "I'm certain," Olivia said, and she was. "You've been so patient with me, so kind. But we're married, Zachary, and I want to truly be your wife." He stood slowly and crossed to where she sat. He cupped her face in his large hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice rough. "Once we take this step, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely and I'll be yours. Are you ready for that?" "Yes," Olivia breathed, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like the gentle press of lips at their wedding. This was fierce and hungry, a claiming that made her blood sing. Zachary lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed that had been only hers until now. He laid her down gently, his large body covering hers, and Olivia felt a thrill run through her at his size and strength. "If I do anything you don't like, you tell me," he murmured against her lips. "Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. And then he was kissing her again, his hands moving over her body with a reverence that made her feel cherished. That night, Olivia learned what it meant to be loved by a man like Zachary Lawson. He was gentle despite his size, patient despite his obvious desire, and when he finally made her his wife in truth, she understood that what had started as a marriage of convenience had transformed into something real and precious. Afterward, as she lay in his arms, her head resting on his broad chest, Zachary pressed a kiss to her hair. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Better than all right," Olivia said, and she meant it. "I love you, Zachary." She felt him tense beneath her, and for a moment she worried she'd spoken too soon. But then he tightened his arms around her, holding her close. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I have since the moment I found you in that alley. I just didn't want to admit it, didn't want to hope you might feel the same." Olivia tilted her head up to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. This strong, capable man who had saved her life was just as uncertain about matters of the heart as she was. The realization made her love him even more. "We found each other," she said softly. "Against all odds, in the middle of nowhere, we found each other. And I'm never letting you go," Zachary promised, sealing the vow with a kiss. Winter came to the mountains, bringing snow and cold that would have seemed unbearable to Olivia a year ago. But wrapped in furs and warmed by the fire Zachary kept constantly fed, she found she didn't mind. They spent long evenings talking and laughing, playing cards and telling stories. Zachary taught her to read the tracks of animals in the snow, and Olivia taught him some of the songs her mother had sung to her as a child. On the worst days, when the snow piled high and the wind howled around the cabin, they stayed in bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Zachary was an attentive husband, always making sure Olivia felt loved and desired. And Olivia discovered a passion in herself she hadn't known existed, a hunger for his touch that never seemed fully satisfied. One night in January, as they lay together after making love, Olivia realized something. She had been so focused on surviving from day to day back in Wilcox that she'd never really thought about what she wanted from life. But now, here in this small cabin with this remarkable man, she knew exactly what she wanted. She wanted this. This simple life, this deep love, this sense of belonging. "You're thinking awfully hard," Zachary murmured, his hand stroking up and down her back. "Just realizing how happy I am," Olivia said. "I never thought I could feel this way." "Neither did I," Zachary admitted. "Before you came along, I thought I was content with my solitary life. But you've shown me what I was missing. You've made this cabin a home, Olivia." "We've made it a home," she corrected. "Together." Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow gradually giving way to green grass and wildflowers. Olivia spent hours outside, glorying in the sunshine and fresh air. She had grown stronger over the winter, her body lean and capable from the physical work required to survive. Zachary had taught her to shoot, and she'd become quite proficient with both rifle and pistol. One morning in April, Olivia woke feeling queasy. At first, she thought perhaps she'd eaten something that disagreed with her, but when the nausea persisted day after day, she began to suspect the truth. She waited until she was certain before telling Zachary. He had been out hunting and came home with a deer slung over his shoulders. After he'd dressed the animal and brought the meat inside, Olivia met him at the door with a cup of water and a nervous smile. "I have something to tell you," she said. Zachary immediately looked concerned. "What's wrong? Are you feeling ill again?" "Not ill," Olivia said. "At least not the way you're thinking. Zachary, I'm going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a huge grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal within a mile. He picked Olivia up and spun her around, laughing like a boy. "A baby," he said, setting her down carefully. "We're going to have a baby." "Yes," Olivia said, laughing at his reaction. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Zachary cupped her face in his hands. "Olivia, I'm more than happy. I'm blessed beyond measure. You've given me everything, a home, love, and now a child. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God for you every single day." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes at his words. "I'm the one who's blessed. You saved my life, Zachary, in more ways than one." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Olivia felt her heart swell with love for this man who had once been a stranger and was now everything to her. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Olivia found herself frustrated by the limitations of her changing body. Zachary was endlessly patient, taking on more of the heavy work and making sure she rested frequently. He was also endlessly fascinated by the changes in her body, often placing his large hands on her growing belly and talking to the baby. "You hope for a boy or a girl?" Olivia asked one evening as they lay in bed, Zachary's hand resting on her stomach. "I don't care," he said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely, that's all that matters to me." "But if you had to choose," Olivia pressed. Zachary was quiet for a moment. "A boy would be useful. someone to help with the hunting and heavy work as he grows. But a girl, well, a daughter who looked like you would be a blessing beyond words. What if we have a boy who looks like me or a girl who looks like you? Olivia teased. Then we'll love them just the same, Zachary said firmly. Any child of ours will be perfect, no matter what. As summer gave way to fall, Olivia's belly grew round and heavy. Zachary had ridden into Wilcox and convinced the town's midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, to come stay with them for the last few weeks before the baby was due. Mrs. Henderson was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had delivered half the babies in the territory. "Your husband must love you something fierce to pay what he did to get me up here," she told Olivia on her first day at the cabin. "Most men would have just made do." "He does," Olivia said simply, watching through the window as Zachary chopped wood. "And I love him just as much." The baby came on a crisp October night, almost exactly a year after Zachary had found Olivia sick and dying in that alley. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Olivia wondered if she had the strength to see it through. But Zachary never left her side, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement even when she screamed and cursed him for doing this to her. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Mrs. Henderson worked efficiently, cleaning the infant and wrapping it in soft blankets before placing the baby in Olivia's arms. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy." Olivia looked down at the tiny face peering up at her, at the shock of dark hair and the green eyes that were already so like his father's. Love flooded through her, so powerful it nearly took her breath away. "A son," Zachary breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out with one large finger to stroke the baby's cheek. "He's perfect, Olivia. You're perfect." "What should we name him?" Olivia asked, unable to take her eyes off the baby. "I was thinking maybe James," Zachary said, "after your father." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. She had told Zachary stories about her father during the long winter evenings, about the good man he had been before the mine accident took him. That Zachary would think to honor him this way touched her deeply. "James Lawson," she said. "I love it." The first weeks with the baby were exhausting but joyful. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, getting up with Olivia during the night feedings and spending hours just holding his son. Watching him with the baby, this big, strong man handling the tiny infant with such infinite care, made Olivia fall in love with him all over again. Mrs. Henderson stayed for 2 weeks after the birth, making sure both Olivia and the baby were healthy before she finally agreed to return to Wilcox. "You've got a good man there," she told Olivia as she prepared to leave. "And a fine son. You're a lucky woman." "I know," Olivia said, meaning it with all her heart. As James grew, the cabin seemed to shrink. Zachary spent the winter building an addition, creating a separate room for the baby and more space for their growing family. He talked about maybe adding more rooms in the future, for the brothers and sisters he hoped James would have. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia and Zachary worked side by side, raising their son and building their life together. They faced challenges, certainly. There were hard winters and lean times, encounters with dangerous wildlife and the occasional injury. But they faced everything together, their love growing deeper with each passing season. When James was 2, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In the spring, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, a tiny girl with Olivia's blonde hair and Zachary's stubborn chin. "Now we're complete," Zachary said, holding Sarah while James climbed onto the bed to meet his new sister. 2 perfect children and the most wonderful wife a man could ask for. But life had more in store for them. 2 years after Sarah's birth, twin boys arrived, Matthew and Lucas, who kept their parents running from the moment they could crawl. Then, when Olivia thought surely they were done, a final daughter was born, Emma, who would grow up to be the spitting image of her mother. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, becoming a sprawling home full of laughter and love. Zachary taught his sons to hunt and track, while Olivia taught all the children to read and write, determined they would have the education she'd never received. The children grew up strong and capable, learning to respect the land and appreciate the simple life their parents had built. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Olivia and Zachary would sit on the porch they'd built overlooking the mountains and talk about how far they'd come. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked one such evening. "Marrying me and staying up here?" "Sometimes I worry you might have wanted more than this simple life." Olivia took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. They were both older now, with silver threading through their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of laughter and hard work. But the love between them had only grown stronger with time. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me everything I never knew I wanted, Zachary. Love, family, a home. I have everything I could possibly need right here." "I love you," he said, pulling her close. "I've loved you from the moment I found you, and I'll love you until the day I die." "And I love you," Olivia replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains, both thinking about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started with fever and desperation had transformed into a love story that would be passed down through generations of their family. Years later, when their children were grown and starting families of their own, Olivia and Zachary still lived in the cabin where their life together had begun. They were grandparents now, with a brood of grandchildren who loved to visit and hear stories about the old days. James had built his own cabin nearby with his wife, and Sarah had married a rancher in the valley below. The twins had gone off to seek their fortunes but came home every summer, and Emma, their baby, had married a doctor and lived in Wilcox, though she visited as often as she could. On a warm summer evening, with the house full of children and grandchildren for a rare family gathering, Olivia stood in the doorway watching the chaos. There was laughter and shouting, games being played and meals being prepared. 3 generations of the family they had built together. Zachary came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Quite a racket, isn't it?" he said, amusement in his voice. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, leaning back against him. "When I think about where we started, how we might never have found each other." "But we did," Zachary said, kissing the top of her head. "Because you were brave enough to trust a stranger and I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." "Do you remember that day?" Olivia asked. "When you found me behind the hotel?" "Every detail," Zachary said. "I remember thinking I'd never seen anyone so sick, still fighting so hard to survive. I knew right then you were special." "I remember thinking you were the biggest man I'd ever seen," Olivia said with a laugh. "I was sure you were going to carry me off to the wilderness and I'd never be seen again." "I did carry you off to the wilderness," Zachary pointed out. "Yes, but you made me fall in love with you first," Olivia said. "That makes all the difference." Their oldest grandson, young Zachary Jr., came running up then. "Grandpa, come tell us about the time you fought the bear." Zachary groaned. "That story gets more dramatic every time I tell it." "That's because you embroider it more every time," Olivia said, pushing him gently toward the boy. "Go on, tell your stories. I'll start getting dinner together." She watched as Zachary was swept up by a crowd of grandchildren, all clamoring for stories and attention. He caught her eye across the room and winked, and she felt her heart flutter just as it had all those years ago. Later that night, after the family had settled down and the children were asleep in various corners of the expanded cabin, Olivia and Zachary finally made it to their bedroom. They were both exhausted but happy. "I don't know how Emma does it with 4 children," Olivia said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can barely keep up with the grandchildren for a few days." "We're getting old," Zachary said, pulling off his boots with a grunt. "Speak for yourself," Olivia said, but she was smiling. "I prefer to think of it as getting wiser." Zachary chuckled and climbed into bed beside her. Even after all these years, they still gravitated toward each other in sleep, Olivia's head finding its familiar place on Zachary's chest. "Thank you," Zachary said quietly into the darkness. "For what?" Olivia asked. "For saying yes all those years ago," he said. "For taking a chance on a rough mountain man who had no business asking a beautiful young woman to marry him." "You had every business," Olivia said. "You saw me when I was at my lowest and you didn't turn away. You showed me what real strength looked like, what real love looked like. I should be thanking you." "Then we'll thank each other," Zachary said, "and call it even." The seasons continued to change and the years kept passing. Olivia and Zachary watched their family grow and flourish, each grandchild a blessing, each great-grandchild a miracle. They grew old together in the cabin that had witnessed so much love, their bodies slowing but their devotion to each other never wavering. On a golden October afternoon, 52 years after Zachary had first carried Olivia up the mountain, they sat together on their porch. Olivia was wrapped in blankets despite the mild weather, her health finally beginning to fail after so many good years. Zachary held her hand, his grip still strong despite his 80 years. "You remember our first autumn here?" Olivia asked, her voice softer than it used to be. "I remember everything," Zachary said. "Every moment we've shared. It's been a good life," Olivia said. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. The best," Zachary agreed. "Though it's not over yet. You've got a lot of years left in you." Olivia smiled, knowing he was being optimistic but loving him for it anyway. "However many years I have left, I want to spend them all with you." "That's a promise I can keep," Zachary said, raising her hand to his lips. But the truth was that neither of them were as strong as they once were. That winter was hard, and in the spring, Zachary fell ill. Their children came from all over the territory, gathering once more at the cabin. Emma, who had learned much from her physician husband, did everything she could. But sometimes age and illness couldn't be fought. Zachary Lawson died peacefully in his sleep one April morning, with Olivia holding his hand and their children surrounding the bed. He was 81 years old and had lived a full, rich life. His last words were to Olivia, "I'll wait for you." Olivia was heartbroken, as anyone would be after losing the love of their life, but she didn't fall apart. Zachary had taught her to be strong, and she honored his memory by continuing to live fully. She stayed in the cabin, refusing all offers from her children to move in with them. This was her home, filled with memories of the man she'd loved for more than half a century. She lived for another 3 years, spending her time with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing down the story of how a mountain man had saved a dying girl, and how that act of kindness had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime. On an October evening, exactly 55 years after Zachary had found her behind that hotel, Olivia Lawson went to sleep in the bed she had shared with her husband and didn't wake up. She was 77 years old. Her children found her the next morning, a peaceful smile on her face, as if she were dreaming of something wonderful. They buried her next to Zachary on a hillside overlooking the cabin, under the vast Arizona sky. At the funeral, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren all gathered, a testament to the love story that had started with such unlikely circumstances. James, the oldest, stood before the gathered family and spoke. Our parents taught us that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It's about choosing someone every day, about building a life together through hard work and dedication. They showed us that real love endures, that it grows stronger with time rather than fading. And they proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. As the family dispersed, each one carrying memories and lessons from Olivia and Zachary, a young great-granddaughter lingered by the graves. She was 17, on the cusp of adulthood and feeling uncertain about her future. "What should I do, great-grandma?" she whispered to the fresh earth. "How do I know what's right?" The wind rustled through the trees, warm and gentle, and the girl could almost hear Olivia's voice in it. "Follow your heart. Be brave. And when the right person comes along, don't be afraid to take a chance." The girl smiled and touched the gravestone gently before walking back down the hill toward the cabin, which would remain in the family for generations to come. Inside its walls, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would continue to gather, to share meals and stories, to celebrate the legacy of love that Olivia and Zachary had built. And in the quiet moments when the cabin was still and the mountains were peaceful, some swore they could feel the presence of the couple who had started it all. Not haunting, exactly, but watching over their family with the same love and devotion they had shown each other in life. The cabin stood for many more decades, maintained lovingly by descendants who understood the importance of preserving their history. It became something of a legend in the area, the story of the mountain man and the hotel worker whose love had spawned such a large and prosperous family. Eventually, the story made its way into local folklore, told and retold with varying degrees of accuracy. But the core truth never changed, that Zachary Lawson had found Olivia Grayson on what should have been the worst day of her life. And in that moment of compassion and courage, both of their lives had changed forever. The mountain still stood, and the cabin beneath it still sheltered those who bore the Lawson name. And though Olivia and Zachary were long gone, their love story lived on, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources, and that true love, once found, never truly dies. In the end, what had started with fever and desperation had become a tale of enduring love, of family, and of the simple truth that one act of kindness can change the course of multiple lives. Olivia and Zachary had built something beautiful together, something that transcended their own lifetimes and touched everyone who came after them. Their story was complete, their circle closed, but the ripples of their love continued to spread outward, touching generation after generation, a testament to the power of choosing love even in the most unlikely of circumstances. They had found each other against all odds, built a life together against all obstacles, and loved each other through all seasons. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.